Joining us now, Denver Riggleman. Denver is the Republican candidate in the 5th District of Virginia for Congress. That is a huge district. It's bigger than New Jersey. This was the seat held by Republican Tom Garrett, who retired, worked on some family stuff. And Denver Riggleman won the nomination at a kind of quasi-nominating type convention thing some weeks ago. So he's a nominee, and he's going up against Leslie Colburn, whose campaign, once promising, has turned into, I was telling this story the other way, her campaign has turned into, like, you take a balloon, you did this as a child, and you blow it up really, really big, just when it's going to pop. And then, you're holding the edge, and you got this big balloon, and then you let it go, and it goes all over the place. And then it just hits the ground. That's kind of the Leslie Colburn. I really can't figure out her campaign, and I'm not on her staff. I'm not a Democratic operative. I have no idea what she's doing. But I have no clue. I've invited her on my show, and they told me sometime in the near future, which is called blowing me off like a cheap suit in the rain. Joining us now, who's coming on my show, Denver Riggleman. Denver, great to have you.
Good morning.
So, Denver, we've got your seat, 5th District, not safe GOP, but leaning GOP heavily. I'm predicting you're going to win this race. But look, you got 63 days to go. You can take nothing for granted. You're kind of an iconoclastic candidate and not towing the line. You're not taking money from a lot of the big money PACs that others have done. Define your campaign right now, and how do you win this race?
Well, we define it by sticking with the issues in the 5th that they feel that's important. We are even doing real things, John, like polling, looking for what's going on actually in the 5th and talking to everybody. I've been to all 21 counties. So really, you just stick to the issues that are most important to the people in the 5th, and that comes down to infrastructure and immigration. It comes down to tax reform, and it comes down to health care. Those are the issues that we speak to. Those are the issues that we make sure we know enough about, and we also talk about honesty, integrity, and transparency throughout the campaign, and that we represent the shared values of the 5th. And if you do that, you talk policy, you talk shared values, and people know you're transparent and you're running for the right reasons, you win the campaign.
So let's get to some of your issues. And one of the criticisms I've had of a number of the Democrats is I don't know what they're running on other than impeach Trump and repeal his tax cut because the economy is doing so phenomenally well. I mean, if you're a Democrat, how do you run against this economy? Like, do you say it's not like 4.5% growth isn't strong enough? It ought to be 5%. When they were in control, it was 1%. I mean, what do they run on, Denver? Honestly, and I'm not asking a rhetorical question.
We've been trying to figure it out, and I think because right now with GDP, and also I have John, I have a pretty strong personal experience with the economy and what it did for my business and businesses in my sector, especially in agriculture and manufacturing, which has been very strong and very positive. I think they're going to go back to some kind of argument that the tax cuts were just tax cut for the wealthy, a tax cut for corporations. I'm just not sure. Based on the numbers, job creation, I think unemployment's under 4% again, right, John? I think it's 3.9%.
Well,
when you start looking at some of these numbers, I just think they're going to come out and say, hey, listen, these tax cuts were just for the wealthy, and it's been proven wrong on every single level. So you just sort of have to stick to the truth and stick to exactly what's going on, because facts is sort of where I reside. That's my universe, John, is facts. Other people's truth, truth and facts can be mutually exclusive, especially on the Democratic side. So what I'm trying to do is stick to facts, stick to policy, and also stick to this really weird notion, right, that I'm going to say what's true, whether it's politically expedient or not. And I think if I do that, they're just going to have a tough time arguing against a very strong economic message right now. John, honestly, we don't know how that's going to be presented.
Denver, if you win this election and get seated in Congress in the 5th District, are you going to be a reliable supporter of President Trump's America First agenda?
Well, so far as policies seem to be working pretty well, don't they, John?
Yes.
So those policies, if they stay America First, if they stay in line with what they're doing economically, I have to support policies that support the 5th District. If there's ever policies that I think are not in line with the Constitution and not in line with 5th District values, then I'll fight them. But at this point, President Trump's policies, especially economically, is something you sort of have to support if you have any type of common sense left.
Denver, let me ask you this. I'm going to go to foreign policy, if I may, and I want to get to the Yemeni situation. Obviously, you've spent a lot of time in the military, in intel. We got a disaster on our hands here where supporting the U.S. and the U.K. are backing the Saudi Emirates coalition in Yemen against the Houthis, who they claim are backed by the Iranians, which is somewhat true. No Iranian troops there, but they are being backed with Iranian resources. But again, no Iranian troops. And 50,000 people in Yemen so far have been killed in this civil war. Over the last 2 weeks, we've had Saudi bombs blowing up a school bus, children dying, a market, moms and their babies getting their bodies blown up. These are by Saudi air raids with U.S. weapons on their planes that the Saudis purchased from the U.S. military-industrial complex, Denver, as you know, under the $1.1 billion deal. And now we've got the UN. I just want to frame this. We've got the UN, who was claiming they're going to do an investigation for potential war crimes. And Mattis came out, General Mattis, the other day with a bus explosion and said he was going to investigate it. Why the hell are we there? Why are we involved in this?
Well, this goes back some time. It started in the Obama administration, and if I know a little bit more about this, I do apologize because it is fairly complex, right? But the Houthis are Shia, and and what I can say is there's certainly evidence that they're backed by Iran. I wish I could go into a lot more on the classified side because you still know that I do hold clearances, and I do hold those dear. But we know Iran is backing the Houthis. We know also, starting the Obama administration, we know when it comes to the Trump administration, some of those controls were taken off, to go after some of those targets within Yemen. The reason we're there is because Iran has its own hegemonic desire to start to control pieces, of the Middle East, and they want to do that any way they can, whether it's through state-sponsored stuff, but really whether it's through funding, whether it's through a pipeline of certain types of weaponry, and any type of support of that nature. And the reason that I know this is because my dog is barking, but the reason that I know this is because I had to deal with this during our counter-IED days starting back in 2006. So we're there because Iran is doing some things that are so palpably wrong, especially against American interests, and that is why we are there. However, if you have Saudi Arabia that's not able to mission plan effectively, and they do things where they're not looking at rule of law or rules of engagement, Mattis is actually absolutely right to have to look into how those missions are being executed. And it's something that we had to do every day when we were mission planning during either 9/11 or any other mission planning things I was involved in all the way up through 2012. You have to look at rules of engagement. You have to look at actually how you're doing your collateral damage assessments and all those things. And if Saudi Arabia is not doing that correctly, and they're using our armaments, which we know what the collateral damage frag patterns of those armaments are, we have to say, listen, you guys have to do things a lot better than this, because what you're doing is you're killing innocent people. You're not doing proper mission planning ROE, and this has to be fixed. However, I don't see us getting out of Yemen anytime soon, John, based on what Iran is doing. So we have to fix ROE, but we can't stop the mission of sort of halting Iranian expansion in the Middle East, because that's what they're trying to do. It is complex, and it's not an easy, idealistic solution. It's going to have to be a realistic solution based on rules of engagement and mission planning, and also what our real mission is in there. And I got a feeling General Mattis is going to take some action on that.
So it seems like what you're saying, Denver, that right now, with the evidence that you have at hand, you're not in favor of the U.S. withdrawing from the Saudi Emirates access into Yemen right yet. Is that my understanding?
Not yet. And if I was sitting on the HASC, here's what I would ask for, right? I would ask for, what's the specific mission parameters, right? Do we have an end date? What does mission success look like? Exactly, what does mission success look like? And what is our social plan, right, for helping Yemen get out of this very bind, right, that they're in right now? Because to say that the Houthis are bad actors and a terrorist group is absolutely true. So it puts you again in a tough situation, and I think that's where people are sort of happy that they have somebody who's not a politician but who has life experience but military and foreign policy experience. I can ask specific questions once I'm in Congress, and I can shape some of those questions for the HASC and where we're going, because I have that experience.
All right, Denver. That makes sense to me. I'm very skeptical of our involvement there, as you know, as I'm skeptical of all U.S. foreign entanglements like these, and I'm really not sure. I mean, I don't like the whole policy. I think that MBS, the Saudi young prince, wants to make a stake in the area, but I think the money that he spent there, he could have simply won the Yemenis over against the Houthis
Probably
by
right.
taking that money and investing it in roads.
John, you say this, is that I despise sort of unparameterized or undefined action, military-wise, because I've been part of many major operations, right? And putting men and women in harm's way, which I've been there, is something you can't take lightly. But this is, what's really odd about this is, in Yemen, Saudi Arabia has sort of taken over this action, but it is them trying to exert their influence also. And for me to say that Saudi Arabia is not complicit and doing some bad things themselves, that'd be absolutely wrong to say that. So it's really these geopolitical decisions that we have to make based on our enemies in the region and how far we're willing to go, right, to exert that influence. And I think that's why you have to ask very directed questions of those conducting the operations and what the foreign policy outcome is going to be. And that's something I'm very interested in hearing when I get to Congress.
Denver, the president publicly berated again his Attorney General, AG Jeff Sessions, yesterday on Labor Day for allowing the Justice Department investigation into 2 Republican congressmen to go forward. He said in a tweet the president did 2 long-running Obama-era investigations of 2 very popular Republican congressmen were brought to a well-publicized charge just ahead of the midterms by Jeff Sessions' Justice Department. 2 easy ones now in doubt because there's not enough time. Good job, Jeff, Trump tweeted yesterday, and he followed it up. He said, Democrats, none of whom voted for Sessions, must love him now. Same thing with Lion James Comey. What is the deal here? If you're in Congress, are you going to call for a new Attorney General?
No. That is not my job as a congressman. And I'm going to tell you this. There's a reason I ran for Congress. Was my fight against what I thought was undue influence by money, people who seem to have no character, those who seem to have no ability to discern that they were a public servant. I read the indictment on Duncan Hunter and also on Collins, and I'm going to tell you this. There has to be a rule of law and a way for us to hold any type of Congress, men or women, accountable for the things that they do. And what Duncan Hunter did and what Chris Collins did, if found to be true, if found to be proven, which they wouldn't have brought the indictments at this point based on what I've read, it probably is. If that's found to be true, these are heinous things that betray the trust of the American people. So I think what President Trump should have done, because I told you, I'll support him when he's right, but when he's wrong is what he should have done. Said, good job, Jeff. We have a Republican administration that's going after 2 Republican congressmen who did some heinous things financially. That's not politically motivated. And what the Justice Department has to do, and when evidence is actually presented, they have to make that case based on the fact that they've solidified that evidence and that all of the interviews have been conducted and all evidence collected. So I think it's a good thing that we're finding Republican or Democratic, look at Jesse Jackson Jr., we're finding Republican and Democratic congressmen and women who are breaking the law. They need to be prosecuted, and I don't think there's really a timeline or a good time to do that, except when evidence is collected. And can you imagine if this happened 2 days after the election? My gosh, the uproar would be awful, that everything that the DOJ is doing is politically motivated. So it's interesting to me. I wish President Trump would have come out and said, hey, good job. This is why I'm running, because I'm not a politician, and any politician like this needs to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law if they betray the American trust.
So the president's tweet on blasting Sessions, you're saying, I want to get this straight, so I don't want to paraphrase, you're saying that it was misguided.
I believe it was. I think it was misguided. I think it was wrong.
All right, Denver, we appreciate that. And we're out of time for this segment. We appreciate your time. Denver,
Thank you, sir.
People want more information. Where do they go? What's your website?
Yep, they can go to denverforcongress.com, or they can go to Denver #4 VA on Twitter. And like I told you before, John, the Denver for Congress Twitter does have a guy dancing in a thong. Please don't go to there unless you want to see that. So
Denver, we will see.
Somebody had stolen that. So that's where you go to find more information.
We will see you soon, and still waiting for the invitation to come out to the major headquarters and spend
We are
the day
going to
up
make
there.
that happen, and we're going to make that happen. You know what? And I know we talked about this before. I will get in touch with you immediately. That has to happen the next couple of weeks. And you know my debate is tomorrow in Rappahannock County against Leslie, the first debate.
All right. We'll be covering that. Denver, good luck.